First of all, let me say good afternoon to the Mr. President and Madam Pro Tem and the entire body of the City Council. Thank you all for your time today. I had an opportunity to reach out to all of you all last week. This meeting that we are participating in right now is a live meeting via WebEx as well as Facebook. And so it is open to the public. I understand there are a considerable amount of citizens and participants who have interest in this topic we're discussing today, which is the federal stimulus money. Originally, we thought we would be receiving the money on the 11th based on the day from the vote in the 60 plus days. Turns out we actually received the money yesterday. And we also received the initial guidelines yesterday. As you all know, the summary is an eight-page document of those guidelines, a detail of 151 pages, which none of us has had those documents. I think it's been right at 24 hours. And so we're still combing through that. I think part of today's intent is to make sure there's no gap in sharing information in real time, what we receive, the council is privy to. I think the second purpose of this meeting is to give update on what we know so far based on these initial guidelines. We have presenters today with Kelvin Datcher, who's a part of the governmental affairs team, but we also have Miss Amelia Muller as well as Coriate Hauser. That's part of the mayor's office as well as IEO to provide some additional detail. And so what they'll do is give a presentation and then we'll yield the floor for conversation. So with that, again, thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to Mr. Datcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. Hope this afternoon finds you well. We are, of course, excited about the opportunity we're being presented with by the federal government, courtesy of President Biden and our great Congress folks who fought very hard for us. As you all know, the city of Birmingham, we were not a direct recipient in the CARES Act. That was back in March of 2020. The new administration prioritized revenues or resources for all levels of government, county, state, cities. And so we are now pleased to announce, of course, that we're going to get $148 million, $148,820,000 to be precise, from the federal government. As we talked about previously, that will come in two tranches. The first arrived yesterday, that was that first half, and literally a year to the date, they said you could set your watch by it, that we will get that second tranche exactly a year later. So those dollars are in house. As you all know, we forwarded it and you guys forwarded it to us once the initial guidance came out from Treasury yesterday, as the mayor mentioned. We began digging into it. Of course, there was an 8-page fact sheet. Then there's this 151-page interim final rule. And so what we want to say about that is, don't expect that to be interim long and don't expect that to be final at all. We know the CARES Act probably had at least half a dozen revisions and interpretations as it moved. We are expecting the same thing from Treasury and other departments and agencies at the federal government as this continues to move and evolve over the next several weeks. There are a bevy of webinars that are going to start taking place as early as tomorrow afternoon. We will be making sure that you all get access to every piece of information that we have literally as soon as we get it. The mayor's made sure that we were focused on making sure we were completely transparent, not only with just the council, but the entire city of Birmingham. So, and with that, Amelia, can we begin with our slideshow? So we have really looked at kind of an overall window of timing in terms of from the onset of the pandemic till today. We wanted to make sure folks understood kind of the larger context and framework for federal recovery resources. CARES Act, of course, made on March 27th, 2020, as we said. Then there was an omnibus bill, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, that was passed and signed by President Trump December 27th of 2020. That's where the $6.2 million that we have in federal in emergency rental assistance, that first tranche came from, that we are now providing and disseminating throughout our community. the American Rescue Plan was signed on March 11th, of course, and that's where our $148 million is a part of that, as well as a bevy of other resources that we are pursuing. Currently, the president is pursuing 2 additional programs, and we'll tell a little bit more about each of those: the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. And we want to make sure you know about those, because we want to give you a larger frame for how you think about the resources that we've already been provided by the federal government. So there are some additional buckets and issue areas in the American Families Plan and American Jobs Plan that may allow us to do different things that may, and be more flexible with the dollars we already have in hand. Amelia?
Yep, I'm going to actually hand it to Coriate for this slide.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon. So as Kelvin mentioned, alongside the American Rescue Plan, we also know that the American Jobs Plan and the American Family Plan are coming too. The American Jobs Plan would create millions of jobs to rebuild our country's physical infrastructure and workforce, to spark innovation, manufacturing here right in our home base. Particularly for the American Family Plan, it's an investment in our kids, our families, and economic future. But today, as Kelvin mentioned, we want to make sure that you guys have a full view of what's happening. But today, particularly, we want to focus on the American Rescue Plan, and specifically the first investment that the city will be getting, or has already gotten, as the mayor has given us that information. So here on the next slide here, we have just some general buckets and fund uses for the American Rescue Plan that cities can use the investment for. So supporting public health response. Obviously, COVID has devastated a lot of communities across the nation. So that's priority to make sure we stabilize our economy by responding very responsibly to our communities and neighborhoods here at home. Address the negative impacts, as we've already talked about, the public health emergency. Serve the hardest hit communities and families. There's a lot in this bill that are for individuals and for families. What we intend to do with this particular first tranche is make sure that our communities are made whole. There's from small businesses to making sure that there's shots in arms, things of that nature that really serve our community and help us boost the economy back to some sense of normalcy, or as some people would say, to a different level than we were before we were at COVID. Obviously, replace lost public sector revenue. That's one of the guidance that we also can do as well. Provide premium pay for essential employee or essential workers. We've all been on the front lines in some way, some shape, form, or capacity. And so providing that premium pay to those who may have not been the nurses and firefighters, police, and that may have already gotten that, we're now able to offer the option of premium pay for all essential workers who are on the front line, making sure that our economy is still working. In addition, we can invest in water and sewer infrastructure and invest in broadband infrastructure. Probably one of the most broadest buckets that we have is broadband infrastructure, but we are, as Kelvin mentioned, as the guidance comes out, we know exactly what we can and what we can't spend that money on, but we're excited to really get these dollars onto the ground in our community so that we can recover from the COVID pandemic as we have over the last year and a half.
So Kelvin, do you want to start? So as we think about those sort of ways that we can spend these dollars, we've already started to talk a little bit with you and with members of the community about what those priorities are, what we're really calling our shared values here. So you'll see, as Coriate mentioned, COVID response, shots in arms, not only ramping up our vaccine sites, but also bringing vaccines to individuals. Speaking to those, that premium pay that Coriate mentioned, neighborhood revitalization remains a central priority for this administration and for the council. We want to make sure that we're ensuring that our small and Black-owned businesses not only survive, but can thrive and grow as they come out of this pandemic. We also want to make sure that our youth are set up to be successful in the classroom, addressing youth learning loss and mental health issues that have arisen as a result of the pandemic. And lastly, working toward public safety community partnerships, working closely with those community partners. And across all of this, really looking at our shared values through a lens of innovation and equity, and how we can be moving the city forward in how we're approaching all of the projects that we're infusing with federal dollars.
Kelvin, you're on mute. I think you're talking, but you're on mute.
It's only been a year. I should have figured this out by now. But council, I mean, if you go back there, a lot of these, we talked about all of these since all of you were inaugurated, some of you very long ago, some of you much more recent. And if we look at the first set of priorities that the council members laid out at a meeting in October, well, excuse me, in March of 2018 at Regentsville, between the mayor and the council, many of you have been very consistent about the things that were important to you. And so we were able to easily translate those things and really try to find ways to help buffer these councilors' priorities, the promises that the mayor's made to our community. What are the real needs that all of us have kind of worked together to address over the last 3.5 years? And so it was very easy to come up with these buckets. They're incredibly broad. We're not trying to limit anybody to them. We're using this as a framework to begin our thinking and our conversations. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we convey is that neighborhood revitalization is not just streets and sidewalks, right? It is that human infrastructure, investing in young people. How do we make sure that we provide the resources to our community-based organizations so that they can continue to make vibrant and successful communities all across the city, along to Wylam, right? From one side of the city to the other. And so these are just kind of broad buckets that we hope can begin our conversations and not limit them. Of course, we received guidance yesterday, as we mentioned. There's an 8-page document, that fact sheet. We hope you'll have time to thumb through that when you can. That 150 pages that we talked about as well, available, and you all have that as well. We're expecting a first read briefing from our federal lobby over the next couple of days. And we're going to work with the council president to have a really robust community as a whole. Once we get much more comfortable with this guidance, both from the federal government and the webinars that are going to be run by the White House, Treasury, the National League of Cities, United States Conference of Mayors, they've all announced webinars in the next several days. And we will work through those and report out to you all. Make sure that you all have the information to register, to log in, to participate yourselves. We will provide some reporting on that. We want to make sure that the council members and their staffs have direct access to the information that is also available to us.
Absolutely. And to that end, as we get information from the federal government, updating birminghamal.gov/recovery. We're also actively working on standing up a sort of Magic City recovery landing page and sort of microsite that we can build out as more and more information comes down. So it's not just sort of a single page, but a more dynamic site that you and your constituents can visit to understand how this impacts their lives and their families. And we're also creating mechanisms for you, your constituents, and city employees to share their feedback. So I'm going to briefly stop sharing my screen and pull up another tool to share with you all. One moment, please. So in addition to today's conversation about sort of our shared values and those priorities that Kelvin spoke to, we want to create a forum for you directly to share your project ideas with us. And part of this is also related to our need and requirement with these federal grant dollars to really track our conversations, to track our projects, to track sort of every little piece of this to the nth degree for federal reporting. So we're inviting and asking you to submit your ideas that sort of fall into these funding categories through a form that will be sent to you later today. This is the form itself. Pretty straightforward, short name for the project, your name or your staff who may be submitting the idea. We're asking for you to list as your project specific to your district, to another district. Do you have an idea for another district or citywide? And what of those funding categories that Coriate walked you through might it apply to? So is it related to the public health response, to infrastructure, et cetera? As we talk through today, some of those shared values and priorities that we want to be centering in how we spend these dollars, we'll continue to build out this list based on your feedback with what those priorities are that we want to make sure we're able to sort through as we consider projects, a brief vision statement, target population, project goal, and sort of total estimated budget, as well as potential community partners that you might suggest be relevant for this project. And it's important to note we're actually creating a similar form both for city employees to share their similar project ideas with us, as well as for our external partners. So we're really inviting the feedback from you, your constituents, and the broader community into how these dollars should be spent so that those who have the most proximity to the impacts of COVID-19 on the economy, on our public health, on our families and our businesses can surface those ideas that are going to be most impactful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can open it up to conversation. Kelvin leading.
Councilors, there are a couple of things we want to make sure that we really reinforce, because that's what we're getting from the federal government. Words like transparency, accountability, auditing, reporting, those will really be the order of the day for us all. It will drive our conversations. It will drive all of our thinking. One of the reasons we want to create this submission form is we want to be able to track what councilors actually submitted, because we want you to be able to hold us accountable for us being able to on specific projects and those kinds of things. But we also want the public to see what the council's considering. We want to make sure that we have some very strong documentation, because at the end of the day, I do not look good in orange. And so we're going to make sure that we meet all of the quarterly requirements from Treasury, that everything that we create is going to have a backstop or back end that will allow for us to collect data, to track data, to accumulate it and send it out immediately, right? We're not going to have stacks of paper like you may find in my office, right? This is all going to be digital, which will allow us to tie timelines to project ideas, to budgets, and to actual expenses, right? So we're going to be incredibly detail oriented in how we deal with every idea, how we deal with every project, how we deal with every dollar, right? Every dollar is going to be tracked and made available. And we want to make that available, not just in our reporting to the federal government, but also to the public, to the residents of Birmingham via that website. As Amelia said, go live with the site for city councils to be able to submit their ideas. That you will get them in the next couple of hours. Today, we make sure that it's all good and we don't find any more typos, right? But we want to get that out to you all today so you can begin immediately. We'll make available on Friday to the employees and to the general public that second opportunity for them to provide input, to provide their ideas and their partnership proposal to the city. But for you council members, you will get that within the next couple of hours. So if there are any questions, I can turn it over to you, but we can also, if there are any questions or discussion points from the council at this point.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm not sure if you can hear me, Madam Pro Tem. That's about it.
I don't see Mr. President on the screen. I don't know if he's in the room. We can hear.
It's all good, Madam Pro Tem. We yield to you to quarterback and or facilitate to you. President Park, I see he's back. We yield to you two to quarterback the next part of this discussion, which is pretty much an open floor.
Yeah, let me just, guess there are any thoughts from any council members on?
Yes, this is Councilor Hill. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well, to be honest with you, I couldn't hear the first part of what we were discussing. I picked up on parts of the bits and pieces. It just wasn't clear. So I hope it's recorded. So maybe within the next hour, I can go back and listen to it. But for some reason, I was not able to get in the volume. And Councilor Hoyt called me and said that he was just having trouble trying to get in. It kept asking him for different prompts. So that's from my end of it. I would just need to be rebriefed again so I can get my mind wrapped around it.
Mr. Here, it is being recorded via WebEx and is also living forever on Facebook Live.
Okay, very good.
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, I just wanted to ask because I've been giving a lot of thought to this after listening to all the different presentations we've had. And I'm looking at something very unglamorous that's needed in my district and probably all districts, and that's sewer repairs because of all the flooding. Well, I mean, which causes a lot of flooding because our sewers apparently are collapsed underneath the ground. So my question is, I saw that form that we're supposed to fill out with our project ideas, and it asks us to give an estimated cost. Well, I have no background in estimating cost for sewer repairs, and I was just wondering who would be able to assist us in the administration or somewhere in determining how much sewer repairs might cost.
Ms. Abbott, you can just put no clue in there. Sorry, Ms. Mayor.
Oh, I mean, that will
Yeah.
be the absolute truth, but you know,
Yeah.
we never repair sewers until they become, you know, an enormous problem because, you know, who can go to a ribbon cutting for a sewer? So it's not very popular. We really need help.
Added, if you have something you want on your list, but you don't have a price, just submit it without that part and we'll figure the rest out on your behalf.
Okay, good. And the next question about sewers, obviously I have not been down in the sewers. And so I don't know where the stop-ups are. And I'm wondering, since we had a big study done on sewers, does the city have a pretty good handle on where the major problems are that are causing the flooding?
Yeah, we can talk about that, I guess, in a separate topic, not necessarily related to what we're discussing today. Also, I've been greenlighted, you and I can take we can get our backpacks and right equipment, footwear, take a deep dive into the sewers tonight.
Yeah, I'll put my waders on, but I might need a wetsuit.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor Woodfin and team, for getting us started with this information that we have before us. I know we've all been very excited to know that we would have this stimulus package actually coming to us directly this time. I guess my question is, as we fill out the paperwork and we identify projects in each of our districts, is there a point person that would be assisting us? And say, for instance, in some of the costs or not so much the validity of the project, but how my project might be one that coincides with other districts or with an overall plan by the city? How would someone help us navigate through that?
Yeah, so we will definitely, Madam Pro Tem, for all counselors, but this is to you, Madam Pro Tem, to answer your question directly. But this goes for all counselors. Remember that document is for the public as well. And so there may be some folk out here who know their price for whatever project they want. For you all with certain projects, you may not. So filling out that form and leaving that line blank because you don't know that number, we will assist in filling out that number for you. I think in addition to that, coalescing around a bigger picture versus the individual district at a micro level, we can reconcile that on your behalf as well. But this exercise says, don't even, if it's interest of you and your district, you write it down and we'll go from there. No conflict.
Thank you.
Mr.
I hope that
President, I have a
answers your
question. Mr. President, I have a question. So we're submitting all these projects and the public is submitting projects. How will you all determine which ones will be funded? Or will all the districts be funded, or how would that be determined?
So the biggest thing, Madam Councilor Smitherman, is that it has to comport with federal guidelines. So imagine the if you take the rental assistance, for example, this is federal funds that have come down, strict federal guidelines that says who qualifies, what qualifies, and then actually filling out an application in its entirety to receive that funding. A lot of people, for example, may be excluded because they don't live in our city limits. Others may be excluded because they didn't completely fill out the form. Others may be excluded because they didn't meet the financial threshold submitted by the federal government. And so for us, we start at what the rules are. That's why we're still going through this 151-page document. We like the 8-page document, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what we can and can't do in detail versus the 151-page document, which it's been a minute since I read a good book where I was able to read 151 pages in a row very fast. But to continue to answer your question, because this is not necessarily a short answer, is the main thing I want everybody to know, this is to the public and the council, the key word before guidelines is initial. Y'all know the federal government as much as I do. At any point in time, they can slap us on our head and say this doesn't comport with what we want to do. Oh, by the way, here's a second batch of guidelines. What y'all originally wanted to do may not work. So please keep that in mind. When they say initial guidelines, that means more guidelines are coming. Those more guidelines may literally not work with the first guidelines. So that's another thing we will have to reconcile. The categories are extremely important because if it fits the category that works, what we know about counselors is that you all represent not only your district, but you represent the small businesses in your district and the citizens in your district. And so your word, your recommendation has a weight to it. When we speak to the public and the public submitting forms, Amelia can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's mainly from organizations. And so it may not necessarily be city council versus an organization. There may be a situation where there can be partnership, but there would be very, very high weight given to the actual individual counselor and or the council as a body because you all represent the people in the district, if that makes any sense. Councilor Smitherman, I hope I answered that question. What I want to do is, Amelia, if you want to add to that answer before Councilor Smitherman responds, because I would like for that answer to be satisfactory to her.
Thank you, sir. Your point about sort of the broader public forum is correct. So there'll be actually sort of 3 forms. So the version that is sent to counselors later today. Then on Friday, we'll invite both city employees at every level, not just department heads and deputies, but every level to submit their ideas so we can surface those sort of most innovative ideas from those who are close to the work within City Hall. And then, as Mr. Mayor said, the sort of broader external facing forum really is targeted toward community partners, and that's community partners broadly construed. So it might be 501c3 nonprofits, it might be social impact oriented businesses, but similar to how we engage with outside organizations and other work that the city conducts, think about those types of organizations. But we want to make sure that everybody, regardless of whether they're sort of the most sophisticated nonprofit or a mom and pop or a church or somebody who has a really innovative idea for serving their community, has the space and the chance to share what impact could look like. And then it's our jobs to make sense of that in the back end. And part of the reason why we're doing it in this way is, as Kelvin noted, so that we have really robust back end reporting, but also so that we can have a kind of global view of projects across geographies, across funding areas, and look in a really concerted fashion at all of those proposals in one place in a really holistic way.
Okay, I think Amelia answered it. Thank you. Because I just want to make sure especially for all my
That's-
colleagues, including myself, we do have a lot of problems. And so I don't want to see where it's like 5 districts get approved for a project and then 4 aren't. Or maybe we all have one problem, like what Councilor Abbott has said, and one district has like 5 locations completed versus 1 location. That's why I asked about that. Not really about the importance of people, just if everybody's within the guidelines, what's the next step for you to be like, okay, well, we're not going to fund this? That was my question, but thank you.
I tell you what, Councilor Smith, Amelia is smarter than me. I'm done. I'm letting her answer everything from now on.
Mr. President, if I may add to that, in all forms, we do ask for them to identify their district. So we'll be able to sort every submission by a district. And so we intend to report that out to each of you holistically so you can see, and then you can actually see what's in your district. And then to Mayor Woodfin and Amelia's point, the categories will then come into play. So you'll see by district, you can see by category, really what's happening. And so we hope with this system being so digital that we can group some of those together and really make a difference in each community. So hopefully that expands to the answer as well.
It does. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Quinn.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, talk to me about timeline. I appreciate the transparency and the process that you guys have set up, but we folks are out there hurting, and we need to, I feel like we need to get these dollars infused into our local economy as expeditiously as possible. So talk to me about what limits, what boundaries have you guys put on this process so that it doesn't become protracted and we find ourselves in a position of, sitting on these funds several months, years later.
So, in full transparency, we have not put those boundaries in place yet. But I think that is something that the team, I know, one of the charges I've given them is I want these dollars out the door sooner than later. If I use the rental assistance money as an analogy, and I want Kelvin and or Amelia and or Coriate to chime in with this, add to my answer, is that when you receive these federal funds and then you get the guidelines, you still have to put things in place from an expenditure standpoint. It doesn't move that fast. If you ask me what my personal biggest priority is, and it's separate from like projects and or other things, is in my mind, by definition, every one of our employees is essential related to how this federal guidelines is written, and we need to, I know I've spoken to all of you all individually, we need to make them whole as fast as possible, but I'm literally waiting on, between our lobbyists and Kelvin Dasher to tell them, can we do that and make that recommendation to you? But that's with everything else as well. So we need to push this as hard as we can, but we got to wait on the federal government to tell us when we can start expending. So Kelvin, to cover my blind spots on the answer.
No, you hit it off. One of the things, like earlier today, Council, was you all passed an agreement with Mocify, right? That Mocify project is really financial infrastructure for the city. It's going to allow us to deploy dollars into our community electronically, right? We don't want to be writing a whole bunch of checks, right? It just doesn't work. And so it's one of the reasons we brought Mocify in, and we were very pleased and thankful for you all approving it. So, for instance, on emergency rental assistance, all that's going to happen electronically. So if you go and get approved, you don't have to worry about when the check is going to get written, when a check was mailed, when a check received, when a check's deposited. And you don't have to worry about whether or not there was that error on an address or an account number, and that check has to be sent back, right? Things we want to put in place will allow dollars to flow electronically as much as possible, allow dollars to flow fluidly. And so a lot of that's going to rely on kind of how much of that infrastructure we can build. And we're also going to have to acquire probably significant amounts of technical assistance and other capacity, right? Maybe grant writers will go out to the hundreds of billions of dollars that are out there, accounting, auditing services. You know, project managers, right? We're looking at all of those kinds of things. So if we can put capacity in place, how does that expedite the kinds of ideas that the council members have? And we think we have a plan to create a plan.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
response to Kelvin's comments and the original question. So I just once I got the 150-page document, Kelvin, I immediately read it. So I guess, are you guys going to wait that second guideline to determine what, because on the 151-page document, there were some really exciting things that I know have been issues. And I'm sorry, I don't know who has feedback right now, but I think they mute their Zoom. But anyway, there was some really exciting things that Birmingham has faced citywide, and that's all 9 council districts. Would there be a chance, and they're bigger projects, right? So there are things that that would require an RFP process and things of that nature that, just take time to do. Do you guys have a timeline are you going to wait till you get that second guidance rather than the initial guidance? Or is there going to be can we go ahead and start an RFP process based on what was in the 151-page initial guidance?
Hunter, I will answer the question with a very direct answer. No, we're not going to wait.
Okay.
I don't think we should wait. I imagine you and your colleagues agree we shouldn't wait. I think we should do everything we can, and then when they come back and tell us whatever they're going to tell us, because Kelvin knows where I'm trying to go with this, we will move accordingly.
So yeah, and I guess to my point to that is that the 150, and I'm glad that that's your answer, Mayor, but the 150-page document had a ton of potential use. It gave examples of a ton of potential uses that that are citywide, that are problematic citywide, and I hope that between the 10 of us, my colleagues and you, Mr. Mayor, that we can attack some of these problems that have not been adequately addressed over the past 30 years, and Randall, and you're in my lifetime, quite frankly, and not short-term, smaller things that might be good for a singular district, but might not really move the needle in Birmingham as a whole. I hope that this is such a substantial investment that we can use this on projects that would impact the city in just a transformative way, instead of the way that we probably usually use the word transformative on every economic development project.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, may I go back? I think this is such a sensitive topic. I want us to give as much as possible satisfactory answers. So to Councilor Dr. Quinn's question, was it answered, sir? Or you need us to elaborate more?
I think that the answer is sufficient. I mean, I think Council Williams is also kind of getting at the same issue. The example that I would give is that we don't want to do is One Pratt Park, where we received funding from the federal government. A substantial portion of it, was spent on consulting and various things, and then we were left with very little that actually made the impact that the funding was provided for. So I want to avoid at all costs getting into that type of scenario. So, putting these dollars to work as soon as possible, while also having the transparency of the process that you guys have set up. I think both of those things are important, but definitely don't want to find ourselves in a position of you know, months or years later, still trying to put these dollars to work in the fashion that they were intended.
The mayor's made it clear that we are to move at all good speed.
That's very fair. And I think this is one of those situations where, you know, if I use the example of the BRT, which I know we're going to give you all an update very soon. You remember when all of us came in and we just had to tell you kind of what we inherited and where it is? I think if there are snafus in the flow of these expenditures, based on something that's either in our control or out of our control, I think it just needs to be over communicated to you all in the public.
Okay. All right. There are the questions. I do have a couple of thoughts as well, but any other colleagues have something to say? Mr. Hoyt, Ms. Abbott, both of y'all are good.
Okay, I just want to say one thing, and hopefully I can put it in a few sentences.
I don't know if I'm good, but
when we're through with
received the information.
Okay. Ms. Abbott, hold on. Mr. Council Hoyt, if you could allow Council Abbott to go first and then you can come.
I would
after.
always acquiesce
Okay.
to the lady.
Okay. Councilor Abbott.
Thank you. Yeah, when all this is over and done with, I just want to see some permanent improvements to Birmingham. You know, my mother used to talk to me about frittering my time away. Well, I don't want us to fritter this funding away, and in the end, when it's all over, the city of Birmingham has not been improved. And that's one reason I mentioned sewers, because we're never going to fix the sewers. You know, at the rate we're moving on sewer projects, everybody's yards are still going to be flooded and their basements are going to be full of water forever, because sewers are not glamorous. So I just want to see, like, you know, if we decide to go on the broadband track, then when it's all over, have Birmingham be a better place permanently, not that everybody got more money in their pocket and went and spent it in some other city. You know,
Okay.
that's just the way it works. So I want to see permanent infrastructure, things that help our citizens and make their lives better.
Yes, Councilor Abbott, to that point, let me just kind of weigh in real quick and then I'll go to Councilor Hoyt. We also have to have a conversation around the current infrastructure bill that's making its way through Congress.
Yes.
So there might be another, as we're having these conversations, there needs to be a list as well. We were on a briefing yesterday where through the Alabama League of Municipalities, talking about, you know, working on our list of infrastructure projects. And so I think sewer, I think broadband, those are the type of issues I think will fit the definition of infrastructure. So I think we've got an opportunity to, if we can't, you know, get it in this current 148, that we then at the same time run parallel tracks to make it to perhaps get some earmarks or get it included in the infrastructure legislation that's working its way through Congress. So I think us working with the mayor, working with all of us, sitting down, talking it, you know, if we can't make one, let's try the other pot as well.
But water and sewer are item number 6 in this money. They said we couldn't pave streets, we can't fix sidewalks, but we can fix water and sewer. So I'm glad if it can be in another tranche of money too. But
Well, I understand,
this one it specifies water and sewer. So I
Yes,
don't want us to
maybe-
forget water and sewer.
Councilor Parker, can you call on me after Hoyt?
I will, and I'm going to respond. I'm going to move on to Councilor, but yes, ma'am. But if we can't get all the projects for water and sewer in this crunch of money, we can pivot and get projects 5, 6, and 7, whatever they are, into the infrastructure bill that's moving through Congress at the same time. So just as we're moving forward, Councilor Hoyt, and then we'll go to Councilor Hilliard. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
You want to
Mr. President,
respond?
I certainly appreciate the update that we received with respect to this, and I hadn't heard all, and I've heard in part because I'm still trying to do work here at the Dannon. But I wanted to express what I heard Dr. O'Quinn mention about timeline, because, you know, everything's at a snail's pace. And I only say that by experience. And I'm still looking for a Greenway project's been on the books for 5 years or more, and it hadn't been moved in the last 3 years. And so what are we going to do different, and how we, you know, roll out these projects? I just think that, you know, I like the dog and pony show, but I want to see the pony do some work. And I mean, that's how I feel. That's been my experience with this administration. And so, what is going to be different? I don't see anything that I've heard today will be any different than what we've already experienced. You know, and I want somebody to prove me wrong. But that's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Councilor Hilliard.
Thank you, President Parker, for getting us on the League of Cities to hear the information that they've brought down. I want to thank the mayor's office and all of his staff for putting this together. And I'm sure we will have many more of these as time passes on to make sure, you know, for so long in my community, in my district, we've been neglected. And I just applaud the mayor's office for actually working with us to help do some things in District 9. But we're still behind the 8 ball. I would love for District 9 to look like the downtown area, the other Crestwoods, and some of the areas, to bring up the value in our community. You know, I want to see our area become a livable area where people don't mind moving because they like the way the community looks. So I'll be very honest with you. Other areas have grown so fast and so much over the decade until it's a given and a take that their areas are going to move. I want to thank Councilor O'Quinn for bringing up a great initiative with the One Pratt Park area. I really applaud you, Councilor Quinn, for thinking about District 9 and what happened with our park. Our park should look like Railroad Park to attract more people in town. It's too small. It didn't meet the criteria of the area, and it should have been larger. Money should not have been eaten up in consultant fees and all types of other fees. It's a disgrace that we don't have something where that's larger. And that's not the fault of this administration or any of us on this council, but our communities should rival, or at least come to an extent where companies downtown and other businesses don't mind coming to our community. As it is right now, we still left behind, and pretty much half of the districts on the council are not up to par to where they should be. And I'll be looking for something that's going to be of great significance that will make people want to move to our areas the same way they are in other areas in the city and bring up the value. So I think it's something that that all of us could leave as our legacy to improve our districts. And I look forward to working with the administration and my colleagues to make that happen. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Councilor Hilliard. Others who want to speak on this?
Mr. President.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
I'm very grateful for you and your colleagues, some of the points you always shared. I do have a note. It's a quick note. Some of these monies require us to spend on non-infrastructure projects. Just want to remind everybody that these are stimulus monies. The funds will be for both programmatic and infrastructure. And I do want to send a friendly reminder, we only got half the money right now. There'll be literally $74 million coming in May 10th of 2022. So just a friendly note.
Mr. President.
Hold on, Mr. Mayor, you finished with your comments and thoughts?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Yes, sir. Councilor
Yeah.
Hoyt?
Yeah, my question is to the mayor. Will there be a follow-up? This is this is on steroids today, but will there be a follow-up meeting where we go through the stimulus, the whole dynamics of that, and and understand the prerequisites in full? Because I just think that's important for us to wrap our minds around what it is that we can expect and not expect.
Yes.
Hoyt, I can kind
I
of,
didn't hear him.
no, I was saying, I was going to say what we'll do is we'll call a committee of the whole meeting in a week or two, and then get the,
What, to counsel again, like you normally do?
that's the protocol that we do, sir.
Oh, to counsel the meetings, because all the
No,
ones
to
we've
have a
been
committee of the
voting on.
whole, to have a committee of the whole meeting. What are you making reference to?
I meant making a reference that we were supposed to have a committee of the whole 2 weeks ago. We didn't have it. You
All right,
canceled the one
we're
before
meeting-
then, we cancel it. So we're not having
Well,
committee of the wholes.
We are having meetings, sir, we are just, you're having your transportation as well. So we're having meetings, and we're working through things. So I think we're meeting today. This is a briefing that we're having, but it's still, an opportunity for us to receive the information. So, so yes, we are.
Yeah,
So-
but I'm asking for details of the information, and that's what we stand in need. That's what's going to empower us as city leaders.
Well, that's why we can come back within probably 10 to 14 days and have another meeting, a work session. We can have a committee of the whole to be able to bring all parties back together and get a status update, go through the documents, seek clarity. I think Mr. Datcher mentioned that there were going to be other partners available. I think in the next week or so, I think he mentioned some of the lobbyists would be available. We'll have additional staff from the League of Cities, policy advisors from the National League of Cities. We've been having briefings on that. I think on Monday, we also have a briefing with the Alabama League of Municipalities, where we'll have representatives from the National League of Cities on a call to talk through the briefing. So this will give us an opportunity to have our other policy advisors, not only our federal team, governmental, but also utilizing some of our other organizations that we're affiliated with to be able to have a broad conversation and have some updates. So the answer to that is yes. So it'll be, we can set it 2 weeks from now and be able to give everyone time to digest the documents, ask questions, seek clarifications, and see if Treasury allows us issues out any more guidelines. But we can set it for 2 weeks from now to have a follow-up on the $148 million. So you want to see what you're available on a Tuesday, or you want to do it on a Wednesday?
It doesn't matter. I would avail myself for, because
Okay.
it's just that important. But
All right, we'll allow 2 weeks from now.
We need to see something differment. And here it is, we're about to go into a budget cycle, and we're not having committee of whole meetings.
Okay, well, whether you call this.
Well, you want me to send you all the emails when you counsel the committee of the whole meeting?
Councilor Hoyt, you can feel free to, and we've had briefings, whether it's with our state legislative lobbyists, our federal lobbyists, where we've invited everybody, where we've talked through various issues on the state level, the federal level. We've invited everybody. I don't know if we've had 100% participation, but we've been meeting in various segments as things come up, we're receiving our briefings and stuff. So, and those are issues regarding COVID, regarding the lottery, regarding medical marijuana. Those are issues that impact the city. So we've been talking about a lot of various things. So we're going to continue to do that. So if you're comfortable, we'll ask staff to check with next Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, whether that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And we'll set that, and we'll have a follow-up on a committee of the whole, have an additional follow-up information on this particular stimulus money. Anybody else?
Mr.
Well,
President, I have a
one last question, Mr.
Yes, sir.
President. Is there a plan to have entities, nonprofits and all, to have a debriefing with them to talk about these opportunities?
The answer is yes. We're just now receiving what what Treasury's guidelines have just sent down. And like I said, now we need to figure out, okay, how do we can have it where 4 or 5 groups come and will make a presentation or give their thoughts or give feedback. So there's a mechanism we can do. I know you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned JCCEO, I think earlier. So I'm just using them as an example because you mentioned them earlier, but different groups, different organizations that some of the nonprofits, or we can either make sure that nonprofits, have the information as well. We need to make sure everybody has this information, have a week or two to digest it, and, also include some of our policy advisors from if it's National League of Cities, Alabama League of Municipalities, our federal governmental team, our state governmental team as well. This will give us an opportunity to arrange that, give people plenty of time to clear their schedules for several hours so we can have an in-depth conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr.
Yes,
President.
sir. Yes, sir.
Another question. So how were the funds deposited? Did that money go into the general fund and versus a grant fund account? And my follow-up to that is, how does this relate to the city budget? The mayor specifically mentioned city employees as, potentially being considered in all of this. That obviously would impact the budget that we will be considering shortly. So explain to me how, where the funds are deposited. Is it in the city's general fund, and how does it relate to the budget process?
Those are great questions, Councilor Quinn. The answer to your first question is that I think would be a detriment for us to commingle these funds. Pretty similar to other federal fundings we have. There's usually its own separate account created to make sure, one, we can guard for and satisfy those dollars that are technically given to us from the federal government. So when it's called upon for a particular audit or they want to assess those funds, they're readily identifiable. Finance department has its own, accounting measures towards that federal funding separate from our general fund. So we think it's very important to note that, and all of us should act accordingly. Your second point is, as we get closer to our process of presenting this budget to the council, what we have wanted to do is, again, attempt to separate those two issues, and if there are any gaps, reconcile. As you know, in the document we received, the 8-pager and the 151-pager, COVID pay related to our workers is not necessarily the same thing as we would want to do for our budget. So for example, our budget would say we're going to do COLA, merit, longevity pay, et cetera, out of our general fund. But finding ways to engage some of the shortfall related to our employees being exposed to COVID and what they deserve from that would be from the federal funds we receive. so it wouldn't be the same. Hope that answered your question.
Sir, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there others having comments thus far? Okay. All right. Mr. Mayor, you have any closing thoughts for your team members?
Yeah, so here are the closing thoughts, Mr. President. I finished where we started, which is thank you for your time. I know you all are busy. I think the other thing is I don't want any distance between us receiving information and then sharing information with you. The good news, for example, is we got this information and you all also got it, but we also shared it with you, so you got it twice. Now we're communicating it now literally within 24 hours, not only to you, but to the public. So we're gonna go back and be super nerds. We're gonna continue to talk to our federal lobbyists. We're gonna continue to, Kelvin and Amelia and Coriate and others on the team take a deep dive on what's next. We're gonna continue to communicate with the public on what this is, how this looks, what we can and what we can't do once we understand those 151 pages. I want to encourage you all to read the 151 pages too. That's a lot of work to do, but I think it's helpful so we can manage our expectations of what we can and cannot do. But that's pretty much it, Mr. President. Just thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also, we'll try to coordinate the calendars as it relates to 2 weeks from now, giving everyone time to digest this initial crunch of documents. And also see if Treasury sends some additional guidelines. But if we check all our calendars 2 weeks, and 2 weeks from now, well, that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, to have some follow-up. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Kel, did you hear that?
Yes, sir, I'm on it.
Okay, we'll coordinate, Mr. Mayor, you and I'll communicate on dates
Yes,
and
sir.
stuff. Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. We'll chop it up just like Madam Pro Tem and I chopping up utilities and rental assistance.
She's gonna handle business. She gonna handle business.
Handle it.
I appreciate everybody.
Okay, is there any other questions? I can't see everybody on the screen. Then, is there any other questions before we? Okay, all right. Mayor?
Chief.
Yes, Mr. Hoyt.
I said, thank you, Chief.
Okay, all right. You good?
We okay.
Was the committee of the whole on Tuesday or Wednesday?
So what now?
There was the committee of the whole on a Tuesday or a Wednesday?
Well, we're gonna check. I said Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I want to make sure 3 days to make sure we check everybody's calendar. I'm sure Ms. Stephanie's listening, so we'll get those. We'll send them. We'll work with the mayor's office and making sure all our team members have plenty of time to be able to block out about an hour and a half to 2 hours so we can.
It don't matter.
Sir?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Oh, I understand. I know, but I was given a 3-day window, whether it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, so we can have several hours to take a deeper dive, so we can have more conversation.
We'll see if it's not council.
I don't know. So what now? We're gonna see if it's canceled.
See if it's not council.
Councilor Hoyt, let's don't go there. Don't go there, sir.
You're fine.
Huh?
I said, you're fine,
let's don't go there, sir. Let's don't go there today. All right. With that, I think we're in a good space. I think everybody's good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Turn it back over to Mr. Mayor. Any closing thoughts or your team members?
Oh, you good, brother. We're gonna, Madam Brother President, we're gonna continue to engage the council and the public. So just thank you for your time.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you all, everybody. Everyone continue to please stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Datcher.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Anything to you, Mr. Hoyt? Anything for you, Mr. Hoyt?
Fix the sewers.